The $1 million I gave you, what did you do with it? Her words shattered the room like a gunshot. Forks clinked against plates, laughter died midair, and every pair of eyes swung toward me. $1,000,000,000? What do you mean? My voice came out hollow, sharp, like glass cracking. My name is Danielle Mercer. I'm 29 years old. And if you think you've seen family betrayal before, wait until you see how deep my bloodline can cut. What happens when the people who raised you decide you're guilty of crimes you never even touched? I stared across the table. My brother, Aaron, who hadn't lifted a finger in years, suddenly shifted in his seat. His face turned white, lips pressed so tight they almost disappeared. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom leaned closer, her manicured nails tapping the tablecloth like a drum of judgment. Dad sat stone silent, jaw clenched, gaze burning holes through me. Around us, cousins and aunts whispered like spectators at an execution. I felt the heat climb my throat. The humiliation was deliberate. The timing was calculated. And the $1 million accusation? That was the dagger. Because I had never seen that money. Not a cent. My pulse thundered in my ears. Mom, I think you're mistaken. I managed. She arched a brow, voice dripping with venom. So you squandered it already? I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to demand why they'd script my downfall in front of an audience. But something in Aaron's shaking hands told me the truth wasn't far away. 30 minutes later, headlights cut across the dining room windows. A knock thundered at the door. The police. And in that moment, I knew someone had set me up. The officer's boots echoed across the hardwood floor as silence suffocated the dining room. Danielle Mercer? He asked, his voice deep, clipped, official. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. You're needed for questioning regarding financial fraud involving $1 million. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just humiliation anymore, it was a public execution. Mom gasped theatrically, clutching her pearls as if she were the victim. Dad stood tall, expression unreadable. But my brother, Aaron, he couldn't stop fidgeting. His knee bounced under the table like a ticking bomb. I don't understand, I whispered. I never received any money. The officer's eyes flicked toward my mother. Ma'am, are you the source of the claim? Yes, she said smoothly, her voice steady, her gaze sharp as steel. I transferred $1 million to Danielle last year. I want to know where it went. Gasps rippled across the room. Aunts whispered. Cousins pulled out their phones. I could feel their judgment piercing through me, branding me guilty before I could breathe. But beneath the humiliation, a darker realization clawed at me. This wasn't confusion. This was orchestrated. Someone had planned to destroy me, and they were playing their hand tonight. I didn't get that transfer, I said, forcing strength into my voice. Check my accounts. Check every statement I've ever made. The officer studied me, then turned to my brother. And you are? Aaron flinched. I'm just her brother. But his voice cracked, thin and guilty. My mother's glare sliced through him like a whip, warning him to stay silent. Something twisted in my gut. The missing million, the sudden accusations, Aaron's guilty pallor. The trap was set, but not for me. And soon, everyone would see it. The officer's pen scratched across his notepad, every stroke louder than the pounding in my chest. Ms. Mercer, you're right. We'll need full banking records. He turned toward Aaron. But something's off. Why do you look nervous, sir? Aaron's chair screeched back. Nervous? I'm not nervous. Why would I be nervous? The words spilled out too fast, too defensive. Everyone noticed. My aunt coughed into her napkin to hide a smirk. My cousin whispered, he's sweating through his shirt. I steadied myself, straightened my spine, and locked eyes with my mother. If you transferred $1 million to me, show the proof. The wire receipt, the account number, anything. Her lips pressed together. She didn't move. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am? She waved her hand with dismissive elegance. It was done through my financial advisor. He handled everything. I don't keep the papers. Convenient. Too convenient. I looked at Aaron. His face was pale, his hands trembling under the table. He avoided my gaze like the coward he was. And in that instant, the puzzle clicked. The million wasn't lost. It was redirected.
to him.
Officer, I said, my voice sharpening. If you want to see where the money really went, pull my brother's accounts. Not mine. Gasps broke out again, louder this time. Aaron's fork clattered onto the plate, his face drained of all color. Shut up, he snapped at me, voice shrill. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous. The officer scribbled faster. My mother's hand flew to her pearls again, this time in panic, not performance. And me? For the first time that night, I allowed myself to smile, because the spotlight had finally shifted, and Aaron's empire of lies was seconds from collapsing. Aaron lurched forward, palms slamming onto the table. This is insane. You're all falling for her drama again. She's always been the family screw-up, and now she's trying to drag me down with her. But his voice cracked. His eyes darted toward the officer like a cornered animal. The officer's tone stayed calm, almost surgical. Sir, if you've got nothing to hide, we'll need your banking records as well. Standard procedure. That single sentence cracked the air like thunder. Aaron stammered. I don't have them on me. I folded my arms, leaning back in my chair with deliberate calm. That's funny. You always brag about having your statements bookmarked on your phone to track your stock portfolio. The room froze. Every relative turned toward him. His jaw clenched. His phone buzzed in his pocket, so loud in the silence it felt like a gunshot. He yanked it out and flipped it face down too fast. The officer caught the movement. Sir, I'll need that device. Aaron's knuckles went white around the phone. You can't just take my property. The officer adjusted his holster. Cooperate, or I'll make the call to seize it as evidence. Mom shot up, trembling, her pearls rattling. Stop this madness. He's your brother. You're supposed to protect him, not expose him. Her words stabbed deeper than I expected. After all the years of being invisible, of being the disappointment now, when the truth was finally clawing its way out, she still shielded him. But I didn't flinch. I leaned across the table, eyes locked on Aaron. The truth doesn't need protecting. It needs witnesses. The officer stepped forward. Sir, hand over the phone. Aaron's hand shook violently. And then he made his move. Aaron bolted from his chair, so suddenly it toppled backward, with a crash. He clutched his phone like a lifeline, his breath ragged, eyes darting toward the front door. The officer's hand went to his holster. Stop right there. The room erupted. My aunt screamed. My uncle rose halfway before sinking back down. Mom grabbed Dad's wrist as if bracing for an earthquake. But Aaron froze, not because of the officer, but because I spoke. My voice cut clean, steady, impossible to ignore. Go ahead, Aaron.
Run.
But before you do, remember the trust fund. Remember the house Dad signed over in 2019. Remember Mom's little, missing necklace that magically showed up in your girlfriend's apartment. I've got it all documented. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide, face pale as plaster. The officer's radio crackled. Another voice. Unit 4, we've got confirmation. The transfers were made to an account under Aaron Carter, matching the sum in question. Proceed with detainment. Gasps rattled around the table like breaking glass. Mom collapsed back into her chair, whispering, No, this can't be happening. Aaron's bravado shattered. The phone slipped from his grip, clattering onto the hardwood floor, screen lighting up with notifications. A flood of alerts, one after another, payment confirmations, wire receipts, luxury purchases, all in his name. The officer crouched, picked up the phone, and stood tall again. Sir, you're under investigation for fraud and theft. Aaron didn't resist this time. He just slumped forward, muttering curses under his breath. But then his eyes snapped up, wild and venomous. This isn't over, and you know it. They'll believe me before they ever believe you. I leaned back in my chair, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Not tonight. Tonight, they've already chosen. The door shut behind Aaron as the officer guided him out in cuffs. For a moment, silence ruled the room. Only the faint hum of the chandelier above reminded me this wasn't some fever dream. Dad's hands trembled as he pressed them flat against the table. His voice cracked, quiet but sharp. Tell me you knew nothing about this. I met his stare without flinching. I knew something. Enough to prepare. Enough to not be blindsided tonight. Mom shook her head furiously. You set him up. You must have. He couldn't. But her words faltered under the mountain of evidence sitting right there in the officer's hands. My uncle finally broke the tension. He could. And he did. You just never wanted to see it. That cut deeper than anything I'd said. Mom wilted back into her chair, face pale and drained, while Dad's eyes shimmered with a betrayal he'd never admit aloud. The officer gave me a nod on his way out, leaving only the family's implosion in his wake. That was when my phone buzzed. A single message, short but heavy. Funds secured. Transfer confirmed. I glanced at my brother's abandoned phone on the table, still lit with damning receipts. He had thought himself untouchable, bold enough to use my name and claim my mother's wealth as his own. But what he didn't realize was that I'd been tracing his every move for months. I looked around the room. The shame on Mom's face, the disbelief on Dad's, the whispers from cousins now avoiding eye contact. They weren't laughing at me anymore. For the first time in years, the power had shifted. And this was only the beginning. The days that followed blurred into one long headline. Local heir arrested for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. Aaron's picture was everywhere, his arrogant smirk now plastered beneath bold, humiliating words. At work, colleagues whispered. At the country club, friends turned cold. His wife, once parading jewelry and designer bags, was spotted pawning them quietly at a downtown shop. My brother's empire of lies crumbled in less than 72 hours. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing. Family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to check in. Old friends congratulated me on handling it with grace. Even my parents couldn't keep their distance. One night, Mom appeared at my door, eyes swollen, voice shaky. "You could have told us," she whispered. "We didn't have to find out like this." I folded my arms. "You chose not to see, Mom. You protected him while he stole from me, while he dragged my name through the mud. Did you ever once stop to ask how I was surviving?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time in years, she looked small, stripped of her certainty, her favoritism exposed under the harsh light of truth. Then came Dad, days later. No excuses, just a quiet, "I was wrong." But apologies didn't erase years of being branded the family's disappointment while Aaron wore the crown. Apologies didn't erase the way they all laughed at my expense when Mom bragged about giving me $1 million that never existed. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The weight I'd carried for years felt lighter. Their shame was theirs to bear now, not mine. Tomorrow, the final piece of my plan would fall into place. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Rows of faces, family, neighbors, reporters, lined the benches, their whispers echoing as Aaron was led in, shackled at the wrists. For once, he wasn't the golden son, the untouchable prince. He was just another criminal, pale and trembling under the fluorescent lights. The prosecutor laid everything bare: forged signatures, stolen transfers, secret accounts. Each document was another nail in the coffin of the image my parents had built around him. When my name appeared on the evidence screen, victim, narrator's name, I felt my lungs finally expand, like I'd been holding my breath for years. Aaron's attorney tried to spin it, blaming stress, blaming miscommunication. But when the judge read out the sentence, 12 years, no parole, the room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, my mother's faint sob. I didn't cry. Not one tear. I just sat still, hands folded in my lap, as the weight of my family's betrayal shifted off my shoulders and onto theirs. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted my name, asking how it felt to win. But this wasn't about victory. It was about reclaiming myself. Weeks later, my parents showed up again, not with demands this time, but with silence. My father held out an envelope, bank documents returning what was left of my inheritance, untouched. My mother's eyes searched mine for forgiveness. I simply closed the door. That night, I walked through the halls of my home, every corner finally feeling like mine. No shadows of favoritism, no weight of false accusations, just quiet. For years, they made me the embarrassment, the black sheep, the forgotten one. But in the end, it was their golden boy who destroyed everything they worshipped. And me, I walked away free.